In the collective dormitory for interns at Tuya Hospital, other roommates either did not return from the night shift or fell asleep. Only one handsome young man was tirelessly practicing sewing. 201 stitches, 202 stitches. Every time Jo-Kin sews a stitch, he counts silently. Today's goal is to sew 300 stitches. Even though he was exhausted and sleepy waves hit him like a tide, he still gritted his teeth and persisted. He had to be tough on himself. The one-year internship was over soon, and if he wanted to stay in the hospital to work, the regular training recruitment 2 days later was his only chance. Tuya is a top 3 provincial hospital with complete hardware and software facilities and numerous famous doctors. Being able to stay and work here will not only allow you to learn many advanced medical skills, but also broaden your horizons and improve your situation. There is huge room for growth and the future will be bright. Everyone wants to stay, and the competition must be fierce. He is also better at pathological diagnosis, and his medical skills are far behind the excellent interns. If you want to stay, you have to work harder than others. The piece of pigskin covered with dense stitches in his hand has witnessed his sweat. Pigskin is very close to human skin, and it is an excellent prop for practicing skin sewing. The closer the props are to the human body, the better the practice effect will be. The drowsiness is getting stronger and stronger, and the clock on the wall has pointed to 0. He ran to wash his face with cold water, and continued to grit his teeth after dispelling his drowsiness. Nearly 2 hours later, he insisted on sewing 300 stitches with steely will. Congratulations, you have completed 100,000 stitches and triggered the experience system. You can get medical experience points for medical practice and surgery. Jo-Kin shook his head vigorously. What the is this? As he thought, something even more miraculous happened. An interface appeared in front of his eyes. Jo-Kin, intern pathological diagnosis, level 2, current experience value 89.5/100. The diagnostic ability standardizes and trains doctors to an excellent level. Cutting, level 1, current experience value 7.6/10. Intermediate level of anatomical ability practice. Stitching, level 1, current experience value 8.1/10. Excellent level of suturing ability practice. Ligation, level 1, current experience value 8.5/10. Excellent level of ligature skills practice. Hemostasis, level 1, current experience value 4.8/10. Hemostatic ability practice failing level. After reading all the attributes, he found that all the scores were very pertinent. Pathological diagnosis has always been his strong point, and also his only advantage. When discussing medical records in the department, he is better than most interns. Suture and ligation are the medical skills he practiced the most. It is not surprising that it can reach the excellent level of intern doctors. Other medical skills, due to limited energy, can't take care of all of them, so they are a little behind. What is the use of this experience value system? Jo-Kin has seen many protagonists in novels take off in various ways after they get the system. Now that such a good thing has happened to him, it is natural to dig this golden mountain. Try to stitch in pigskin. Sewing experience value plus 0.1, ligation experience value plus 0.1. He couldn't help a burst of ecstasy. I practiced stitching 100,000 times before, and my experience value is still only 8.1. Now, with only one stitch, the experience value has risen to 8.2. The speed of improvement is like a rocket. If the experience value continues to increase at this rate, he only needs to sew 18 more stitches, and his suturing skills can be promoted to the second level. He was suddenly full of energy and no sleepiness. Regardless of the fact that the hour hand had reached 0, he continued to practice sewing on this piece of pigskin. The experience value is also rising steadily. When he finished the 14th stitch, it seemed that an electric current flowed through his whole body, and he felt comfortable all over. Congratulations on your promotion to the second level of ligation. Current experience value 0/100. The lower level of training for ligation ability. His understanding, application, and operation level of ligation seem to have climbed to a new peak that has never been reached before. Good guy, you have risen to the level of regular training so quickly. Once in hand, I have the world. Under the itch, he tried to tie a square knot with both hands on the spot. It only takes 0.5 seconds. He tied a square knot for at least 5 seconds before, which is 10 times faster. Compared with the knots tied before being promoted, no matter how neat or firm they are not the same. I heard that the director's knotting level is so high that holding a needle with one hand and operating it on the tofu brain or a ball of cotton can ensure that the tofu brain does not suffer any damage and the knot is firm. Just imagine how fragile the bean curd is, and it will rot if you pull it casually when knotting. Jokin is still far from that level. However, he believed that with this miraculous experience point system, it would not be impossible to slap the director. After trying to tie the knot with both hands, he tried to tie the knot with one hand again. This time it took 18 seconds and the knot was stronger. The pull on the suture is tight. He didn't try to tie the knot with one-handed pliers again. It can't be done well by hand, and it is definitely worse to tie knots with pliers. Just like the swordsman in martial arts novels, you need to practice the sword to the point where you can use your arms and fingers to be considered a little success. Tweezers and pliers are far from being alive in his hands. Even a little clumsy, not even dexterous. Jokin continued to practice hard with a sullen head. Due to the improved ligation level, his suturing speed has also been accelerated. Soon, his stitching experience rose to 10/10 as he wished. Congratulations on your promotion to the second level of stitching. Current experience value 0/100. The suture ability is under normal training. Finally upgraded. He grinned silly. He was fascinated by the wonderful taste of upgrading his medical skills. It also means that the gap between him and good interns is narrowing. According to this improvement speed, it won't be long before they can catch up with them. After the suturing technique was upgraded, some incomprehensible aspects of suturing before were suddenly cleared up. The use and operation of sutures are different. Yu reading www.yuyugonshu.com. He couldn't wait to experience the upgraded stitching technique. Hold the needle with forceps, pierce it into the pigskin, thread it out, and tie a knot. All the movements were done in one go, as if there was such a trace of a master's demeanor. The time for sewing a stitch has been shortened by nearly 50 seconds. The suture effect has been improved even more. The skin of the wound is aligned very neatly, the angle of the needle insertion is just right, and the distance from the cut edge of the skin is also just right. This is the stitching ability after promotion. At this moment, he looked at the previous stitches again. Just 2 words: garbage. He can now spot some deficiencies and shortcomings in stitching at a glance. This feels a lot like reading the homework done in the 1st grade after the 6th grade of elementary school, with disgust on my face. Why is the handwriting so ugly? Such a simple arithmetic problem can be calculated wrong, how stupid. He felt the rapid improvement of his medical skills, and the invisible pressure brought to him by those outstanding interns has been 10-9. Instead, full confidence overflowed between brows. At this moment, the pigskin has been completely sewn up. Jokin picked up the scalpel, ready to squeeze out the last bit of value from it. After finding a suitable knife position, the scalpel is carefully drawn across. Cutting experience value plus 0.1. Every time a hole is cut, the cutting experience value will increase by 0.1. After 21 knives, this piece of pigskin is useless. Seeing that he was only 0.3 experience points away from being promoted to the second level of incision medicine, even though he was unwilling, he had no choice but to dispose of the garbage. If I buy another piece of pigskin tomorrow, I will definitely be able to upgrade the incision technique to the second level. The clock is pointing to 1 o'clock in the morning, it's time to go to bed. I have to go to work tomorrow. An intern is the most humble existence in the hospital, even worse than the cleaning staff. Doing the most tiring work, I was scolded countless times a day. Teachers scolded, department doctors scolded, nurses scolded, and sometimes had to be scolded by patients and their families. The key is not paid yet. Bear the burden of humiliation in order to survive as soon as possible. When you become a regular training doctor, your treatment in all aspects will be greatly improved. It won't be so hard. That night, Jokin slept very soundly, feeling more relaxed than ever. In the dream, he became famous and became a master surgeon. All kinds of extremely difficult operations that famous doctors could not handle, he solved them with a wave of his hand. Tuya Hospital is proud of him, and the medical community respects him as a master of modern surgery. When he woke up, he realized that it was just Huang Liang's dream. He was still that little intern. Just wait, sooner or later your dream will come true. Glancing at the wall clock on the wall, it was 7:10. Because I went to bed very late, I woke up more than an hour later than usual. In the dormitory, roommates who get up early are already reading books, or practicing basic skills such as toothpick beans and sewing. The internship is coming to an end, and he can feel the tension and anxiety in the air. Everyone is trying their best to make themselves stronger. I heard that Tuya's regular training recruitment is open to both the interns of the hospital and social medical personnel, and the competition is fierce beyond imagination. Thousands of people participated in the regular training and exams, and it would be nice to have 20 people stay in the end. The elimination rate is as high as 98%, which is scary to think about. It is not an exaggeration to describe it as a success. A person's life is actually a competition all the time. Only a small part of the best can enter key middle schools. Then junior high school will be promoted to high school, and a large part will be eliminated. Take the college entrance examination and eliminate a large part. The postgraduate entrance examination eliminated some of them. Those who stay to the end will stand at the top of the pyramid. Jokin failed the postgraduate entrance examination after graduating from university. This time, he didn't want to fail again. Must kill. Morning is prime time for reading, clear mind, and strong memory. After he finished washing, he checked that there was still some time, and hurriedly took out the medical book to read. The rise of every famous doctor depends on the accumulation of time. This book is 1000 cases of surgical pathological diagnosis compiled by Mr. Huang Haoshong and many famous surgeons. The book records a large number of real cases. The patient is a 34-year-old woman who lives in a rural area. 7 years ago, she found that her neck had become thicker without any treatment. In the past 2 years, her neck has become significantly thicker and she has difficulty breathing, but she has no symptoms of hoarseness or dysphagia. Touch her own, multiple nodules were palpable in the front of the neck, the largest was the size of a chicken egg, and the smallest was about the size of a peach pit. I once went to the clinic and took iodized sugar pills for treatment, and the tumor in the front of the neck did not decrease significantly. Joe can carefully read the cases in the book. According to the patient's symptoms, medical history, and examination results, he began to deduce the cause and pathology. After some deduction, he thought it was a typical scapular gland tumor. After the reasoning was completed, after reading the diagnosis results of the famous teacher, as expected, it was indeed a tumor of the scapular gland. Finally, after the female patient underwent surgical treatment, the tumor removed was detected as benign. It is also a blessing in misfortune. Because of thyroid tumors, the probability of malignancy is high. Jokin just finished reading this case. Pathological diagnosis experience value plus 0.1. I didn't expect that reading books can also increase experience points, which is really a surprise. It seems that there is no need to worry about the pathological diagnosis falling behind in the future. Its importance is no less than that of surgical techniques. Pathological diagnosis is a test of a doctor's application of medical knowledge, as well as the accumulation of diagnosis and treatment experience, analysis ability, judgment ability, and other comprehensive levels. Having tasted the benefits, and was about to read another case, the roommate greeted, "Jo-kin, let's go, you will be scolded for being late." He closed the book and went to work in the hospital with a few roommates. He is currently practicing in the Department of General Surgery, writing medical records, performing various nursing care for patients, changing dressings, measuring blood pressure, writing medical records, and performing operations are his basic daily routine. Don't think that you will have the opportunity to practice surgery after surgery. It takes several hours to stand on the operating table with the instructor, and sometimes it takes more than 10 hours to stand for an operation. The only things that can be obtained are hooks, skin cleaning, and the like. Don't even think about closing the cavity and sewing the skin. The teachers who lead them are very high level, the deputy director level, and there are more than a dozen interns under them. When performing surgery on stage, the lineup is even more luxurious. The attending level is only worthy of being a first aid. If there is a chance to close the mouth, those residents rush to do it like hungry wolves. How can I get an intern? The day passed so uneventfully. Jo-kin wanted to have wings, so he immediately flew back to the dormitory to practice medical skills. The day after tomorrow is regular training recruitment, time is very tight, he must race against the clock. It is difficult to buy pigskin for practice suturing in the vegetable market. Its thickness and refrigeration treatment have requirements. He usually buys them in the teaching building of the hospital. When he was choosing pigskin, he had a whim: should he buy a white mouse and go back to practice dissection and hemostasis? Hemostasis has always been his weakness, but he can't be held back by it. After some selection, I bought a medium-sized pigskin and spent 40 yuan. The price of white mice is relatively expensive, almost 60 mice. He bought the best one and spent a full 200 yuan. With such a high price, ordinary interns really can't afford it. Jo-kin's family background is good. In order to improve his medical skills, he is willing to spend money. Return to the dormitory with the pigskin and the white mouse. Hey, Brotherkin is a pigskin and a white mouse. It seems that he is going to practice until 2 or 3 o'clock today. Isn't this going to be recruited immediately? Grind your guns before the battle, and shine even if you don't shine. You are all working hard. I can't hold back the 211 dormitory. Jo-kin responded with a smile. I heard that this year's regular training recruitment is open to the whole country, and the number of applicants has exceeded 4,000. In previous years, only about 2,000 people applied for the job. This year, the difficulty of staying is at least doubled. Our lives are miserable. Guji, where did you hear the news? Is it true? The roommates tensed up. It's absolutely true. And the number is still increasing. I think this year is Xian. Guji's parents work in the health system and are well informed. Jo-kin's heart was heavy after hearing the news. However, so many people rush to join Tuya, which also shows that every position here is very popular. Good stuff, everyone wants it. It's up to each other. Jo-kin began to practice against the clock. First cut a hole in the pigskin. Cutting experience value plus 0.1. Cool. It's still 0.2 short of being able to advance to a level. Make persistent efforts and continue to dissect this piece of pigskin. Finally, the sweet congratulations sounded. Congratulations on your incision technique being upgraded to level 2. Current experience value 0/100. The lower level of training in anatomical ability. The cutting has reached the standard training level, which is so cool. Now his understanding and operation of anatomy have jumped to a new level. When cutting, the hand does not shake or tremble, whether it is vertical cutting or oblique cutting, it can be easily competent. Even Liao, which was previously untouchable, has made great progress. Try to experience a secondary incision on pigskin. When he looked at the pigskin, he was surprised to see the lines on it. This is a capability that was not there before. Holding the scalpel and cutting it down, the feel is quite different from before. Now I can vaguely perceive the subtle differences in cutting the epidermis, dermis, and muscle layers. I heard that a good surgeon cuts off a stack of paper with a knife, and cuts as many layers as he wants. At that level, the incisor has been practiced to the point of perfection. As long as their knives touch the wall of a blood vessel, they can sense it immediately. This can greatly avoid the tragedy of cutting off important blood vessels or nerves during the operation. Zhou Ken's current level of anatomy is better than most interns. If he can be promoted to the third level and reach the level of a resident doctor, he will probably have the strength to crush outstanding interns. The chances of being killed out of thousands of troops can be much higher. After cutting and upgrading, he began to practice suturing and knotting diligently. In less than an hour, he sewed 150 stitches. This efficiency is more than 1.5 stars faster than yesterday, and it has increased several times. And the sewing effect is much higher than the practice level. Looking at the rapidly increasing experience points, Zhou Ken was full of energy. Work hard, strive to upgrade the 2 medical skills of suture and ligation to the 3rd level tonight. Another hour passed, and the whole pigskin was covered with seams. A total of more than 340 stitches were used. If I had known earlier, I should have bought a bigger pigskin and brought it home. He looked up at the clock on the wall, it was less than 9 o'clock. He used to have 300 stitches and had to stay up until at least 1 a.m. Reading www.yuyuganshu.com is now shortened by 4 full hours. He is so happy that he wants to cry. After getting up and moving around, he found that all his roommates were also struggling. The best one should be Guji. He is practicing tail vascular anastomosis in white rats. This is a delicate job of high difficulty. Must be done with a microscope. Guji's suturing may have reached or approached the level of a resident doctor. Zhou Ken secretly guessed. Sitting back in front of his practice bench, he looked at the white mouse. I'm sorry, man. There are 2 common methods of anesthesia for white mice. One is cotton ball anesthesia. Buckle it into a beaker, put in a cotton ball soaked in ether, and keep turning it. After a few minutes, the mice will be anesthetized and left to be slaughtered. Zhou Ken used intraperitoneal anesthesia for it. The advantages are fast onset and long-lasting anesthesia. After a while, the white mouse remained motionless, as if dead. Fix it on its back on a surgical wax dish, and start the dissection. After choosing the knife position, hold the scalpel and cut open its belly carefully. Compared with cutting the pigskin, he was obviously a little nervous. Practicing on living creatures can't help but worry about cutting its intestines and internal organs. As soon as the knife was cut down, blood came out immediately. These will increase the tension of the surgeon. Fortunately, the incision has been upgraded to the 2nd level. Helped him tremendously. A 4 cm long wound appeared, and the intestines inside were not cut. The blade is fairly neat. Cutting experience value plus 0.2. No mistake, right? How did the experience point double? Zhou Ken was extremely surprised. Practicing incision on pigskin can only increase 0.1 experience points each time. How to switch to a white mouse to practice is double experience. Could it be because of practicing on living creatures? After making this important discovery, he was both surprised and delighted. It seems that this experience value system still has a lot to be developed. Practicing incision on white mice doubles the experience, so what about practicing other medical skills? After the wound was opened, the intestines, kidneys, bladder and other organs inside were all exposed. He was in no hurry to gut it. Instead, a closed cavity suture was chosen. Sewing experience value plus 0.2, ligation experience value plus 0.2. All are double experience, so cool. It feels like I usually go out for a walk, but now I am driving, experiencing unprecedented speed and passion. Before he knew it, Zhou Ken had cut a total of 14 knives on the white mouse. Every cut avoided the vital points, and then the cavity was closed and sutured. It's not that he had any enmity with this white mouse in his previous life, but to ensure that it is always alive. Only in this way can you continue to earn double experience points. At this moment, the clock has pointed to 12 o'clock. In total, there should be more than 200 stitches. Suturing on living creatures is slower than practicing on pigskin. However, because he earned double the experience, the conversion was very cost-effective. He checked the experience points of various medical skills. Pathological diagnosis, Level 2, current experience value 89.6/100. Excellent level of training. It was originally 89.5, because I read a medical book this morning and finished reading a case, which increased by 0.1. Given enough time, just read 104 more cases to get it up to level 3. The third level is the resident level. Not to mention that there are no interns who can reach this level, it is estimated that there are very few interns. At most 1 or 2 outstanding monsters may have reached this level. If Zhou Ken can upgrade his pathological diagnosis to the third level before the regular training is recruited, his chances of staying will increase by at least 50%. Pathological diagnosis accounts for a very high proportion. It is the first and compulsory item in the interview. You can see how important it is. He sighed, but it was a pity that time was too tight. I have to work during the day and practice medical skills after get off work at night, so I don't have time to read it all. Besides, after reading 104 cases, it is not a simple reading, but a deep thinking and inference. For simple cases, one can be read in 10 or 20 minutes. When encountering difficulties, 1 or 2 hours may not be enough to check various materials and repeatedly demonstrate. Stitching, Level 2, current experience value 87.8/100. Excellent level of training. Ligation, Level 2, current experience value 89/100. Excellent level of training. These two medical skills can be regarded as a pair of twins, and the progress of experience points is about the same. Having grown so much overnight, Zhou Ken is already very satisfied. If he could have found out earlier that practicing on living creatures would double his experience, maybe his 2 medical skills have been upgraded to level 3 by now. If I buy another white mouse tomorrow, I will definitely be able to raise them to the level of a resident doctor before the recruitment of regular training. Cutting, Level 2, current experience value 3.6/100. The lower level of training. The advancement of this medical skill is relatively slow. However, when participating in the recruitment of standardized training, it should be enough to have the level of standardized training. Hemostasis, Level 1, current experience value 4.8/10. Hemostatic ability practice failing level. This medical skill has now become Zhou Ken's major flaw. If it can't be upgraded to the second level, the recruitment of regular training the day after tomorrow will definitely seriously hinder him. He looked at the white mouse. Time to practice hemostasis techniques with it. A scalpel in one hand and an electric coagulation knife in the other. Continuously cut a series of wounds on the white mouse, and then the electric coagulation knife followed, pinpointed the bleeding point, and pointed at the severed blood vessel. The electrocoagulation knife mainly coagulates small blood vessels through high-frequency current, and coagulates and carbonizes the blood through the action of electric heat, so as to achieve the purpose of hemostasis. Because of the horizontal dishes, he always made various mistakes. Either the broken blood vessel was missed, or the surrounding tissue was accidentally injured. However, this situation is improving as he continues to practice. Every time he successfully stops the bleeding, his hemostatic experience value will increase by 0.2. It's still cool. The speed of practicing hemostasis is much faster than suturing and cutting. Any cut can have 2 or 3 bleeding spots. After the electric coagulation knife is clicked, basically 0.2 experience points are obtained. Congratulations on your hemostasis up to level 2. Current experience value 0/100. The hemostatic ability is under the standard training level. After successfully stopping the bleeding of the white mouse 26 times, Zhou Can's hemostasis was successfully upgraded to the second level. This made him happy. Finally, the shortboard of hemostasis was made up. In Long Wangshu, he found that hemostasis is so easy to upgrade, so he immediately adjusted his goal and rushed to the third level of hemostasis. He kept drawing wounds on the white mouse. Then electrocoagulate to stop the bleeding. After being promoted to the second level, his hemostatic efficiency increased several times. Now it is basically possible to avoid hitting at one point, and the chance of injuring the tissues around blood vessels is greatly reduced. Just when he was practicing hard. Hemostasis experience value plus 0.1. Try again, still only increase by 0.1. The rat's heartbeat had stopped. It died. Pity. Zhou Can sighed. The current experience of hemostasis is 46.4/100. It seems that if you want to upgrade to the third level, you can only wait until tomorrow. Even if it dies, it still has a modicum of value. I saw him holding a scalpel and began to dissect its internal organs. When the white rat was completely changed beyond recognition, his incision experience rose to a second level 9.7/100. That's pretty good. The harvest tonight is beyond imagination. Look at the clock, it is already 2 o'clock in the morning. He quickly cleaned up the practice bench, disposed of the garbage, took a shower and went to bed. This night, no dreams. Because I was too tired. The next morning, it was his roommates who woke him up. Zhou Can, if you don't get up, you'll be late. Zhou Can opened his eyes and saw that it was 7:32. He was so frightened that he got up from the bed, washed up quickly, and rushed to the hospital at a speed of 100 meters. Interns are required to arrive at work at least 20 minutes earlier. He didn't want to hear the general chatter of the hospital. After arriving at the hospital, first finish breakfast in the cafeteria as quickly as possible. Then go back to the department to handle a series of daily work. The task of each intern is very heavy. The superior doctors can't wait to leave all the trivial chores to the interns. In other words, this is training you. Xiao Zhou, quickly inform the 27-bed patient that he is going to have surgery at 10 a.m., and you are responsible for following up. The total voice in the hospital is always so loud. Obviously not a few years older than Zhou Can, Xiao Zhou screamed happily. Who calls someone a senior? Okay. Zhou Can glanced at the time and hurried to the ward to notify the patient and his family. Preoperative preparations are cumbersome and must be meticulous. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com. He dare not be careless. After arriving at the ward, out of responsibility, he inquired about the patient's physical condition in detail. There is no problem, and then inform the patient to change clothes, defecate, fast and drink, and so on. During this period, the superior doctor entered the ward and talked with the family members, and asked the family members to sign an informed consent form for the operation. After the operation was confirmed, the anesthetist also came. It is to go through the process of talking and asking the family members to sign. These necessary processes cannot be avoided. In case of doctor-patient disputes, doctors and hospitals can be well protected. Everything was arranged properly, and the nurse lady entered the venue. Dr. Zhou, did you prepare the patient's skin? Not yet. Zhou Can was depressed. These tasks are obviously the duties of nurses, so why did they become his business? Don't be dazed, I've brought in the tools, and I'll leave the skin preparation and indwelling needles to you. The nurse was pretty, but her tone was fierce. What can Zhou Can say? Do it now. After he finished, the sister nurse finally had a smile on her face. She nodded with satisfaction and said, well, Dr. Joe's preoperative preparation is getting more and more proficient, not bad. Hurry up and send the patient there, otherwise you will the director should scold someone. A black line appeared on Joe Can's forehead, and he pursed his lips. Can you be unskilled? Let our interns do all your work. Oh, you've learned to talk back to your sister, right? Do you still want to find a wife? Be good, my sister will introduce you to a girlfriend. The nurses looked fierce, but they actually got along pretty well with him. Joe Can knew that he was no match for these married young women, so he hurried away with the patient. It made the nurse laugh from behind. The red light and lightning all the way pushed the patient into the operating room. Good morning, Director Liu. Good morning, senior doctors. Joe Can saw that people number 17 and 18 were already standing inside, each in surgical protective clothing, masks and hoods. To be honest, if you don't identify carefully, it's easy to mistake people. Say hello, he now has experience. The highest-ranking Director Liu greeted alone, and the other doctors replaced it with a superior doctor. In the past, Director Liu usually went to the outpatient clinic in the morning. Today's operation is ahead of schedule. It is estimated that there is a temporary itinerary. I'm going to the Provincial Medical Association to attend a symposium in the afternoon, and I'll leave after the operation on this patient. Hurry up and start. Director Liu's qualifications are actually quite old, but his academic achievements are a bit poor, and he has been stuck at the level of deputy chief physician. Getting rid of that adverb was what he wanted most before retirement. From his recent frequent participation in various academic conferences, we can see how urgent he is. The patient was lifted onto the operating table together. The patrolling nurse asked the patient to take off his shirt and did a skin cleanse again. Then the anesthesiologist came to check the patient before anesthesia, and after confirming that the indicators were met, he began to install various life monitoring probes on the patient, wear a breathing mask, and so on. For a major operation, the anesthesiologist is as important as the chief surgeon. He is responsible for monitoring the patient's vital signs throughout the process and giving advice in a timely manner. This is a cervical lymph node tuberculosis resection operation, which belongs to the third-level general surgery. This level of major surgery is at least performed by surgeons at the deputy director level. Even the attending doctor with rich surgical experience can only mix in one or two assistants. The dangers of surgery are self-evident. Joe Can is just an intern, so he has a momentary highlight moment when sending patients into the ward. Now that the patient is on the operating table, he doesn't even have a chance to pull the hook. You can only stand behind and observe and study. In fact, this kind of large-scale operation is still a novelty to observe once or twice. If you watch it a few times and don't try it yourself, you will learn very little. Interns often use the phrase flying around to laugh at themselves. I can't remember what tools are used in which part of the operation, and how to operate it. Only in some sudden emergencies, the use of rescue drugs is impressive. Mr. Gao, can you hear me? The anesthetist administers anesthesia to the patient through respiratory anesthesia. The patient's eyes were closed feebly. Calling out to the patient is intended to test the patient's response. The patient seemed to be in a deep sleep and was unresponsive. The anesthesiologist checked the patient's limbs again, and turned to look at the various indicators on the life monitoring screen. The anesthesia is successful, the patient's vital signs are stable, and the operation can begin. These words were obviously addressed to the chief surgeon. Director Liu asked the equipment nurse to help put on the gloves, and the first, second, and third assistants all took their positions. This formation is very similar to the charge before the battle on the battlefield. It's just that the enemy the warriors want to destroy is disease. Open skin. The chief swordsman said to Kazusuke. For such an important operation, the chief surgeon generally only performs the most critical part of the operation. It is also the most difficult part. I saw an assistant holding a knife land on the marked knife position, calmly and slowly cutting the patient's neck cortex. There are dense blood vessels and numerous lymph nodes, which made Zhou Can's scalp tingle. If it was him who opened the skin, he didn't dare to use the knife at all. With the work of opening the skin and dissociation in place, the second and third assistants also worked hard to use hooks to enlarge the surgical wound, increase the surgical field of view for the main surgeon, and create favorable surgical conditions. A lymph node the size of an egg can be seen, surrounded by multiple lymph nodes of various sizes. The carotid artery was throbbing. It is extremely difficult to remove these diseased tissues in areas densely populated with blood vessels and nerves. The chief surgeon concentrated on peeling off the largest lymph node. Concentrated expression, calm, delicate and dexterous movements. The cooperation of the first aid is also in place. As long as there is a bleeding point anywhere, the bleeding will be stopped immediately by electrocoagulation. As precise and quick as whack-a-mole. Zhou Can watched with admiration. Just in the middle of the operation, the patient suddenly convulsed and his vital signs dropped sharply. Immediately afterwards, the monitoring instrument beeped an alarm. Not good, the patient's blood pressure dropped below 60, his breathing was abnormal, and his heartbeat was 160. Mr. Liu, did you hurt the patient's carotid artery? The anesthesiologist asked nervously. No. After all, Director Liu has seen all kinds of dangerous scenes, and he remained calm in the face of danger. There is also a very small chance of injury to a vital nerve. There are no respiratory nerves in this area. Kazuk continued. The resident doctors behind were all at a loss. The performance of the interns was even worse, with panic and confusion. In this very short period of time, the anesthesiologist once again told everyone the bad news that the patient's condition deteriorated sharply and he had entered a state of shock. Shock is very close to death. The sweat on Lu Lao's forehead broke out immediately. Wipe the sweat. The hand-washing nurse hurried forward to wipe Director Liu's sweat. Panic spread rapidly in the operating room. If the patient died on the operating table due to unknown reasons, Lu Lao's reputation would be ruined, and those who participated in the operation would also be ashamed. Zhou Can took a deep breath and let it out to adjust his nervousness. Force yourself to be calm. At this moment, Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com actually felt an invisible responsibility on his shoulders. It is the mission of every doctor to protect the life and health of patients. Even though I know my abilities are small, I still want to contribute. This patient happened to be in charge of bed follow-up and surgery, so he knew the patient's condition, symptoms, and various examination results very well. He began to ponder over the patient's medical records, medical history, and various examinations. At this time, he inadvertently caught a glimpse of red rashes appearing on the surface of the patient's skin. He seemed to think of something. Yes, it must be so. Zhou Can suddenly said a word without thinking at this time, which surprised everyone. Xiao Zhou, don't make a sound. Didn't you see that Director Liu and the attending doctors are thinking? The chief resident reprimanded him in a cold voice. Director Liu, I found the reason for the patient's sudden shock. Zhou Can ignored the general's warning, but looked at Director Liu excitedly. This time, everyone was shocked. They all turned to look at the intern standing in the back row. Even the experienced Director Liu and the attending physicians couldn't find the reason. Can he, an ordinary intern, find the reason for the patient's shock? They don't believe it. What do you think? After the initial surprise, Director Liu decided to listen to the intern's opinion. But I didn't hold out much hope. He has taught for many years, and what he has seen most is the kind of young junior whose heart is higher than the sky and whose life is thinner than paper. I thought I had read books for a few days and learned some medical knowledge, so I was pretentious, thinking that I was so awesome. The analysis of various diseases is also very impractical, and it is only based on personal subjective assumptions. In the end, it was ridiculous. Look at the rashes on the patient's body, which only appeared after the operation started. When I clean the skin of the patient in the ward, I can confirm that the patient does not have these rashes on the patient's body. The faces of the doctors became a little ugly. Especially the main swordsman and one assistant. They are all the first and second responsible persons. What nonsense are you talking about? Do you mean we made these rashes? The hospital chief scolded in a deep voice. This is no joke. The patient suddenly went into shock on the operating table, and Zhou Qian still said that, which is tantamount to pinning the responsibility for the accident to the chief surgeon and others. This kid is pure and ignorant, he doesn't know what he can say and what he can't say. Director, I think the patient is a symptom of allergies. Zhou Qian ignored the chief resident and continued. Allergy. Director Liu's eyes lit up instantly. Yes, why didn't you think about it? It was only because the patient went into shock suddenly that his mind was in a panic. Have you ever done a skin test for anesthesia? Director Liu turned to ask the anesthesiologist. I've done it, everything is normal. And I asked the family members and patients before the operation, and there is no history of allergies to anesthetics. The anesthesiologist dared not take the blame. I think the patient probably has a rubber allergy. Zhou Qian continued. Why do you say that? Director Liu found that this in turn was not simple, and he already attached great importance to Zhou Qian's opinion. Because when I was collecting blood from the patient, I tied the patient's arm tightly with a rubber tube, and he showed a very resistant expression. At that time, I didn't think much about it. Now that the patient suddenly went into shock, coupled with the various symptoms revealed, I boldly speculated that the patient should it's a rubber allergy. Zhou Qian calmly stated his conclusion. Pathological diagnosis experience value +1. The sudden increase in experience points, and an increase of a whole point of experience points, is simply a pie from heaven. It made him happy. With all the experience points in hand, he was even more sure that his diagnosis was correct. It turns out that using medical skills on patients can increase the experience value by 10 times that of reading. No wonder all doctors say that going to the operating table is the only way to grow fast. Now he finally understood why it was just an opportunity to sew skin and close his mouth, and those normally proud residents fought for it like hungry wolves. For rapid growth. Anti-shock treatment was given to the patient immediately. Everyone changed the rubber items. The roving nurse immediately called the family to ask if the patient had a history of rubber allergy. Director Liu acted decisively and made a series of arrangements. When you should be decisive in rescuing patients, you must not be mother-in-law. If the prime time for rescue is delayed, there will be no recovery. After rescue, the patient's vital signs gradually return to normal. It's okay, it's okay. The anesthetist was as happy as a child. During the operation, the life of the patient is escorted by the anesthesiologist. Every doctor wants the patient to leave the operating room safely. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief, with smiles on their faces. At this time, another good news came. Director Liu, I asked the family members just now. The patient is indeed allergic to rubber. The itinerant nurse in the audience came back after making the phone call. Okay. The cause of the shock has been confirmed, and I can operate with confidence this time. Director Liu is quite old, and he was really scared just now. It's almost late. After the crisis was resolved, he immediately thought of the biggest hero. Looking at Zhou Qian, who was standing in the distance, his gaze was more amiable than ever before. Xiao Zhou, right? Student Zhou Qian. Zhou Qian was very speechless. After nearly a year of internship, his teacher didn't even remember his name. But this kind of thing is normal. The teaching teachers are generally not low-level. In fact, they rarely lead the interns themselves. Generally, it is under the supervision of the attendants and inpatients. The one who cares about Zhou Qian the most is Dr. Feng, the chief resident. You have performed very well. You are calm in times of crisis and have solid medical knowledge. You can apply what you have learned at critical moments, and you can connect some details of patients and make a comprehensive argument. This is especially valuable. Director Liu used several commendatory words such as very good, unruffled in times of danger and very valuable. It can be seen how much he admired Zhou Can's performance just now. Come on, stand here, and you will stand in this position for my surgery in the future. Young people, you should train more. The seat Director Liu was referring to was the seat of the hospital terminal. This position is often referred to as the for support position. It is extremely difficult to get this position in Director Liu's operation. Even the resident doctors can only take turns to stand in that position. Now Mr. Liu personally spoke to designate that position for Zhou Can, which made all the residents and interns envious. Thank you Director Liu for cultivating. Zhou Can was flattered to suddenly enjoy such good treatment. After a one-year internship, he followed the teacher to the operating room countless times, and it was the first time he stood in such an important position. I was always squeezed out of the fourth assistant's seat when I was hospitalized, and I was very disappointed. Taking advantage of Mr. Liu's good mood at the moment, he forced a smile and said, Director Liu, although I have studied with you for several years, I am only 28 years old, and I am also a young man in your mouth. Old man, don't care about me. A crying child has milk. The main reason for the hospitalization is that Zhou Can will always occupy the position of the fourth assistant in the future, and the others will not have a chance, so he said so. Haha, you bastard, you have a smooth tongue. Don't worry, everyone has opportunities. Director Liu scolded with a smile. With your words, I feel relieved. I want to be your student for the rest of my life. The hospital is always good at playing the emotional card. A few words coaxed Mr. Liu until his eyebrows curled up. If you leave a good impression in the hearts of the leaders, it will be easier to get training opportunities in the future. Okay, let's continue with the operation. Xiaozhou, you help the hook, and watch how I free the diseased tissue, especially the parts adjacent to large blood vessels and important nerves. Skill and experience are extremely important. Mr. Liu continued to operate on patients, and directly let Zhou Can participate in the operation. Although it is just a hook job, this is a third-level general surgery. There is an attending doctor who is doing the work of pulling the hook. It is an honor for him, an intern, to be among the drag hooks. The clever mouth of the hospital manager failed to shake Zhou Can's position in Director Liu's heart after all. In today's operation, he is destined to stand behind Zhou Can. At this moment, Old Liu has already started. Carefully peeled off the huge lymph node mass and the surrounding tissue with one knife at a time. The scalpel seemed alive in his hands. Which part should be cut with the knife, the strength, angle, length of the stroke, etc., are all ingenious. The cooperation of the first aid is also in place. When the diseased tissue is peeled off, new bleeding points will continue to be generated. As soon as he helps, he will immediately point over with the electrocoagulation knife in his hand. The bleeding stopped instantly. The two of them cooperated very well. The job of the second assistant is to assist the chief surgeon in the operation. For example, support the tumor, or pull away the tissue that may hinder the operation, so that the best surgical field of view is exposed in front of the surgeon, etc. Zhou Can found that participating in the operation at close range and observing from a distance are completely different. It was obviously Mr. Liu who was doing the knife, but Zhou Can was nervous as if he was on the scene. Every time he saw Liu lay a dao up and down, his heart would fluctuate accordingly. When the knife was dropped, his heart was suspended and he was very nervous. I can't help worrying, what if the knife cuts the patient's artery? Shouldn't it cut a nerve? It wasn't until old Liu raised his knife and the patient was safe that he breathed a sigh of relief, and his heart fell to the ground. The operation went smoothly, and all the lymph nodes and tumors that needed to be removed were successfully removed one by one. Zhou Can consciously gained a lot. I have a deeper understanding of the separation and resection of tumors and lymph nodes. For example, when separating the tumor from the arteries, how to reduce the risk without injuring the blood vessels. Another example is the complex surgical environment around the tumor, how to remove the cocoons, remove the obstacles step by step, and so on. Also, Kazusuk's flexible use of various methods of hemostasis also inspired him a lot. Which blood vessels need to be ligated and which need to be hemostatized. How to operate the bleeding point next to the nerve and so on. These are difficult to learn in books. Must learn in actual combat. The operating table is like a battlefield, ever-changing. Different situations require different approaches. This requires doctors to continue to accumulate and use flexibly. Okay. It's all cut up, remember to take it for pathological examination. Based on my personal experience, the possibility of malignant transformation is very small. Lu Lao explained after looking at the cut tumors and nodules on the plate. He Hans Hung, Song Zi, I will leave it to you to stop the bleeding from the surgical wound. These words were obviously addressed to the first and second assistants. During the operation, these two people are equivalent to the right-hand man of the chief surgeon. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com. The medical skills of the two are not weak, and they have undertaken many important tasks during the operation. You've worked hard, take a rest first, and let us check if we don't do enough. The first assistant was very humble. The second assistant should belong to that kind of practical school. Don't talk much, just work silently. Assist when it's time to assist, and charge when it's time to charge. Jokin and the third assistant were still pulling the hook hard, watching the first and second assistants do blood vessel anastomosis and fluid extraction. These jobs are very technical work. General indications are not necessarily competent. If the hemostasis of the surgical wound is not done well, it is easy to cause hematoma and effusion after suturing. This can seriously affect patient recovery. Old Lu, the wound has stopped bleeding, please check again. Director Lu didn't dare to be careless and checked carefully. Especially in some hidden locations, they will even be poked open for a closer look. This rigorous style is very worth learning for young doctors. Pretty well done, ready to sew skin. Director Lu nodded with satisfaction after checking. For a job like leather sewing, the first, second, and third aids are not valued. At this time, Zhou Qin, who had been hooking directly, felt that the opportunity had come. His current suture and ligation have reached the excellent level of regular training. He dare not do blood vessel anastomosis and organ suture, but skin suture should be no problem. Zhou Qin was not the only one staring at the chance of skin stitching. The residents and interns behind him were all eagerly waiting. The opportunity is fleeting. It's not easy to speak after being robbed by others. Zhou Qin plucked up his courage and said, Director, can you give me the opportunity to sew the skin? The resident doctor in the back became anxious when he heard it. Before Mr. Lu could open his mouth, someone hurriedly said, Dr. Zhou has never done it before, and the part where the skin was sewn this time is the neck with a high risk factor. To be on the safe side, I suggest you not to argue this time. Even if I have completed many first level and second level skin sutures, but I dare not say that I am fully sure. Another resident doctor nodded and agreed, safety should come first. It will be safer if we have a resident doctor who has some experience in skin suturing. They are all highly educated and high IQ, competing for opportunities to exercise, and everyone is unambiguous. Old Lu also had some troubles. The wound suturing of tertiary surgery is more difficult than that of primary and secondary surgery. Zhou Qin is just an intern, to be honest. He was very worried. It's just that Zhou Qin made great contributions in this operation, saved Lao Liu's evening festival, saved the life of the patient, and owed him a great favor. Facing Zhou Qin's eager eyes, Mr. Lu couldn't bear to refuse. That's all right, you can sew a stitch first. If the level is not bad, you will sew the skin. After thinking about it for a few seconds, Mr. Lu finally decided to give him a chance. Thank you. Thank you. I will do my best. Zhou Qin was so excited. The first opportunity of skin suture surgery that I finally won in my life, I cherish it very much. As long as the stitching is done this time, it will be much easier to fish out the seam skin later. This is called qualifications. The profession of a doctor is very special, and safety is more important than anything else. Seniority is very important. For example, a doctor successfully performed a lung cancer removal operation. When there is another similar case, he will confidently say, "I have done this kind of operation, and the patient has recovered to health now." When the patient heard this, he immediately felt relieved. "You have found the right person, doctor, please treat me too." See, that's one of the things seniority does. "Xiaozhou, stand in my position and sew." Kazusuk stepped aside, out of the way. Jokin hesitated for a moment, then walked over with a firm gaze, and stood in the best surgical position on the operating table. This is a difficult 3-level operation. As an intern, he successfully took the position of chief surgeon, and this can be boasted for a lifetime. Take 3 deep breaths and try to calm your mind. On the first day in the operating room, Mr. Liu taught them that they must have a steady mind when performing any operation. He took the needle holder and tweezers from the equipment nurse. Needle. The seams are all in place. It just needs to be stitched directly. All eyes were on him. Looking at the open flesh, Jokin subconsciously clenched the suture tool in his hand. No matter how hard he tried to stay calm, he still felt nervous and his heart beat faster. "Don't be afraid, just be bold and careful. That's how everyone came here." Sansuk comforted him with a smile. Just now, the two pulled the hook together, which can be regarded as forming some fate. Jokin raised his head and nodded gratefully at him. Then he lowered his head and stared at the patient's wound again, and quickly worked out a suture plan in his mind based on his understanding of suture. Select the needle position of the first stitch, insert it obliquely, and thread it out. Then carefully tie the knot. Sewing experience +1. At this moment, he was concentrating on sewing, and the experience value of sewing a stitch increased by 1 point, but he didn't care about it. It is this kind of concentration that makes him appear particularly calm. Elder Liu didn't stop it, and it was even less likely that other doctors would disturb him. Jokin continued to sew. For the suture of subcutaneous tissue, simple intermittent suture is generally not used, and continuous suture is generally used for such parts with low tension. His sewing movements are becoming more and more skillful and confident. Nervousness, fear of poor stitching, and fear of being scolded were all forgotten. Now there is only one thought in my mind, to try my best to sew up the patient's wound. Congratulations to your suture skills for upgrading to level 3. The current experience value is 0/1000. The suturing ability is inferior to that of residents. His stitching experience reached level 2 last night, 87.8/100. Each stitch now adds 1 experience point. After the 13th stitch, the suture was advanced at this critical point. God rewards hard work. God help those who strive for self-improvement. The level of suture has been greatly improved, reaching the level of a resident doctor, which is immediately reflected in the effect of his suture. Director Liu, standing in front of the operating table, showed deep appreciation in his eyes. This kid is really talented and making rapid progress. When she sews the first stitch, she still looks very immature. The technique, movement, and perfection can only be said to be barely qualified. Look at the current level again. Not only the suturing speed is significantly improved, the technique is clean and neat, the movement is smooth and standardized, the organization is more neat, and the tension of the suture is just right. There is no doubt that the wounds that are sutured now will heal faster. Rizai can be taught, and will become a master in the future. Lu Lao was very happy to find a good seedling. Doctors, there are two most gratifying things: the patient is cured, and the doctor has successors. At this moment, Yizhu was shocked by Zhou Kan's rapid progress. Second assistant didn't show any expression, only surprise flashed in the depths of his eyes. Sansuk nodded again and again, the smile on his face getting stronger and stronger. Hospitalization is always a bit funny, eyes are fixed on Zhou Kan's movements, his eyes are getting bigger and bigger, and the eyeballs are about to fall out. Maybe he never thought that this little intern who was called around by him every day was so powerful. At the beginning, the few residents in the back hoped that Zhou Kan's suture would fail, and they would be kicked off the operating table by Director Liu. Then they have a chance to go up. Unexpectedly, this kid was just doing his best, and his performance was getting better and better. Now it seems that they are completely out of play. All of them showed disappointed expressions. The dozen or so interns standing at the back had mixed reactions. Some people envy, some people admire, and I'm afraid there are also those who are jealous. We are both interns, why is there such a big gap? Two young unmarried nurses have already started to look at this extraordinary intern frequently. He is handsome and has such strong strength, so he is quite attractive to girls. Zhou Kan turned a deaf ear to the outside world, and only saw the patient's wound and suture in his eyes, heart, and mind. After the suturing technique was upgraded to the third level, he seemed to be handy in the subsequent suturing. The sewing is also getting better and better. Of course, Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com. His suturing and ligation experience points are also increasing rapidly. After suturing the subcutaneous tissue, the next step is to suture the skin. It is very different from the feeling of practicing sewing pig skin. In addition to the different feel, the mentality is also very different. After all, this is suturing on the patient, just like walking on a tightrope. Every stitch, and even every knot, is like walking on thin ice. Never dare to have any negligence. Congratulations on your promotion to the third level of ligation. The current experience value is 0/1000. The ligation ability is inferior to that of residents. When the skin sewing was about to end, the ligation was actually upgraded to the third level. Now he has 2 medical skills that have reached the level of a resident doctor, which has also become his 2 trump cards for participating in the recruitment of regular training. The 3-level suture plus 3-level ligation has the ability to anastomose general blood vessels. Even nerve anastomosis, which is more difficult than general vascular anastomosis, can be challenged. Finally, he finished the last stitch. The third-level ligation that has just been promoted is used. A nice and strong square knot is tied. Director Liu, the stitching is complete, please check. Zhou Kan stepped aside respectfully and gave up his seat. Only then did he realize that his back was wet. Just now, he was concentrating on stitching, he was very nervous, and his physical strength was also quite exhausted, but he was sweating all over. But it was worth the sweat. Because he, a novice Ziobai, finally successfully completed the first real surgical suture, and bravely took the first step in his career. Years of hard study and hard training off stage day and night, in order to one day be able to stand on the operating table and save patients. Although skin sewing is not a high-tech job, it opened a good game for him. Well, the sewing is okay. It's not bad to have such a good performance on stage for the first time. Director Liu first affirmed his stitching. Then the topic changed, however, there are still some things that need to be improved. For example, the stitch spacing can be shortened. After knotting, the cortex will fit more tightly. Now with the naked eye, it can be seen from the surface that the fit is dense. There are actually tiny gaps in the dermis. That's not going to help the wound heal. Only someone like Lu Lao who has a lot of experience in surgery can see the existence of small gaps under the cortex at a glance. Also here, when choosing the needle position, you can get closer to the incision margin. As the Analects said, far away will cause complaints, and closeness will not be inferior. If the needle position is too far from the incision margin, the suture will be drawn too long and the strength will be loose. Needle position: if it is too close to the cutting edge, the suture distance is short and the pulling force is strong, but it is easy to cause the skin to be torn. This degree can only be controlled by yourself. Director Lu usually rarely explains these basic suture points. I also saw that Jokin is a good seedling, worth cultivating. This is the detailed explanation. By the way, the selection of needle positions during suturing is not uniform. Some parts of the skin are tough and can be closer to the incisional edge. Some parts of the skin are fragile, and the distance from the incisional edge should be properly extended to ensure that it does not break. The seemingly simple skin sewing has so many profound skills. Students have memorized it, and they will definitely understand it in practice in the future. Jokin nodded sincerely and said, "Which parts of the skin are tender and which parts have strong skin toughness must be slowly explored in surgical practice. And different age, gender, skin strength will be different. Children's skin is definitely more tender than the elderly. Women's skin is thinner than men's. The difference can only be understood and accumulated by oneself." Seeing that he has a very humble attitude towards learning, Mr. Lu loves this student even more. "Your potential is very good. You can do your best in the recruitment of Tuya Gaipei this time. If you can stay, I can apply to the hospital and I will guide you." When the other interns heard Mr. Lu say this, their eyes turned red with jealousy. This is a great opportunity. You know, Mr. Lu is at the level of deputy director. If it wasn't for his poor academic performance, he would have been the director long ago. Among the deputy chief physicians of the general surgery department, Mr. Lu is definitely one of the best. I don't know how many doctors and residents who want to seek guidance from Mr. Lu. Even the attendants are vying to be Mr. Liu's students. Now that Mr. Lu actually threw an olive branch at Zhou Qian, an intern, how could he not be envied? "Dr. Zhou, it's your luck to meet a nobleman," the hospital chief said sourly. The sourness turned sour, but his address to Zhou Qian quietly changed. From Xiao Zhou to Dr. Zhou. With such a trace of respect. "Thank you Director Lu for your appreciation." Zhou Qian is not stupid, so he hastened to thank him for such a good deed. Old Lu smiled and nodded slightly. He looked at the anesthesiologist. "How is the patient's condition?" "The patient is waking up, and his signs are stable. The blood oxygen is slightly worse, but it is within the normal range." "Well, I'll leave it to you guys here." Elder Lu looked at Kazusuke again. "Dr. He, please pay more attention to the patient's post-operative 12 hours. If there is any abnormality, please call me at any time. This major surgery is extremely dangerous. 12 hours after surgery is called the high-risk period. In the whole perioperative period, its risk factor is second only to the operation stage." "Okay. You can go to the symposium without worry. If we compare their group to a small sect, Yazua's status is equivalent to that of a big brother. When the master is not around, the elder brother assumes the duties of the master." Not long after, the patient regained consciousness and behaved normally after the operation. After observing that there is no problem, he issued a doctor's order and sent him back to the ward to recuperate. Back in the office, the interns who usually had little contact with each other became enthusiastic about him. The cold and serious resident doctors also became more polite to him. His status in the department has risen significantly. It feels so good to win the respect of everyone with this kind of real ability. It also strengthened his determination to continue to improve his medical skills. After writing the medical record and finishing the work at hand, Jokin began to figure out how to upgrade 1 or 2 medical skills as much as possible before tomorrow. At present, the 2 medical techniques of suturing and ligation have reached the level of hospitalization, so there is no need to worry about it. Hemostasis medical skills can only wait until after get off work, buy white mice or rabbits and go back to the dormitory to practice. Now I'm just an intern. If I want to go to the operating table to fight for the opportunity to exercise to stop the patient's bleeding, I'm just wanting to eat. Anatomy can only be practiced at home. Originally, Jokin did not expect to advance to the 3rd level of anatomy before the regular training was recruited. Because he has too many medical skills to improve and time is limited, he can only give priority to the more important suture, ligation, and pathological diagnosis. Now, suddenly, he has great ambitions. As long as you plan well and use all resources and time reasonably, you may be able to upgrade all 4 basic surgical skills and pathological diagnosis to the 3rd level before the recruitment of regular training. If you really want to upgrade all these 5 medical skills to the 3rd level, you will definitely be sure to apply for a regular training doctor. At that time, it will be other people who should worry about losing the election. Pathological diagnosis is the most difficult medical skill to improve. But it ranks first among all medical skills, and no medical skill can shake its position. Zhou Qin was appreciated by Director Liu today, and he jumped from an unknown intern to a key training target. More than half of the credit belongs to his pathological diagnosis and medical skills. It shows how useful it is. Now prepare to raise it up first. He checked the experience value of pathological diagnosis, level 2, 90.6/100. Excellent level of training. Only 9.4 experience points are needed to be promoted to the 3rd level. If you upgrade by reading cases, you can only add 0.1 experience points for each case you read. He needs to read 94 cases, which is estimated to take at least several days. In the operating room, he added 1 experience point to the successful diagnosis of the patient. After tasting the huge sweetness, he began to think about it. Where is the easiest place to get a diagnosis? It must be a clinic. Checked the roster. It turns out that Dr. Yasuhi will come to the outpatient clinic in the afternoon. Zhou Qin's mind immediately became active. Taking advantage of the relationship appreciated by Director Liu, he begged Dr. He with a shy face, and maybe he would agree to give him a chance to practice as an assistant to the doctor. At this moment, Dr. He is carefully checking the written case. Zhou Qin stood up and walked over. Dr. He, would you like some water for your teacup? He Hans Hung is not only the attending doctor, but also has the highest status among all the attending doctors in the department in terms of seniority. Many people speculate that next year he is likely to be promoted to deputy chief doctor. On weekdays, they are kind to these junior doctors. Dr. He looked up at Zhou Qin. You kid has nothing to show courtesy, so you must ask me for something. Tell me, what's the matter? Zhou Qin's little thought was seen through, and he couldn't help laughing. Hee, I didn't expect that Dr. He not only has superb surgical skills, but also has a lot of enthusiasm in psychological medicine. I am so small, I can't escape your eyes at all. Zhou Qin flattered him first. Thousands of wares and thousands of wares, flattery does not wear. Everyone loves to hear good words. Especially in front of the leader, occasionally saying a few nice words can greatly enhance the favor in the leader's mind. Things to do next will be much easier. Tomorrow will be the recruitment for regular training. My pathological diagnosis is lack of practice. I checked the duty list just now. You will come to the outpatient clinic in the afternoon. Can you bring me along to help you and accumulate some practical experience with you? Zhou Qin said what he asked for with a shy face. Well, okay, you follow me to the outpatient clinic in the afternoon. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com. After a little hesitation, Dr. He readily agreed. Thank you. If the regular training has been recruited, I will treat you to a big meal. Zhou Qin was so happy that he thanked repeatedly. Give it a go and turn your bike into a motorcycle. When it's time to fight, you have to fight bravely. Let's see, isn't there an opportunity to exercise as a medical assistant? He did the math, 9.4 experience points, if every patient diagnosed can add 1 experience point. It only needs to diagnose 10 patients to upgrade the pathological diagnosis to the 3rd level. Dr. Feng, assign Xiao Zhou's work to someone else in the afternoon, and he will come with me for consultation. Dr. He greeted the chief resident Dr. Feng. Most of the work arrangements for general surgery interns are managed by Dr. Feng. Okay. Dr. He personally opened the mouth, and Dr. Fang only had to agree. I saw him take out a roster, and then began to forcibly add tasks to other interns. Xiao Gao, take care of the patients in beds 21 to 26 in the afternoon. Xiao Wu, I'll leave it to you to follow up on the patients in beds 29 and 31. In this way, Zhou Can's work in the afternoon was allotted by the hospital manager. Even if the interns who were given the task were unwilling, no one dared to challenge the authority of the hospital. I can only agree in a muffled voice. Social competition is everywhere, survival of the fittest. The strong go up and the weak go down, this is the law of nature. Dr. He is willing to give Zhou Can a training opportunity because he feels that Zhou Can has great potential and is worth training. As for other interns being squeezed, this is the result of fair competition. Opportunities are available to everyone, and if you seize them, you can climb higher. There is an opportunity to become stronger and stronger. In the afternoon, Hans Hung took Zhou Can into the number 4 outpatient room of the Puyi Hospital. The corridor outside was crowded with patients waiting for treatment. Some are follow-up consultations, and some are seeking treatment. If it is in the morning, there will be more waiting patients here. Modern people live a fast-paced life and are busy with work, often neglecting their health. Some small problems drag on and become big problems. In addition, environmental pollution is becoming more and more serious, and garbage and harmful food are flooding, leading to a high incidence of various diseases. Tuya Hospital is overloaded almost every day. General surgery has become the hardest hit area after the emergency department. Xiao Zhou, you will be in charge of writing the medical records later. Okay. Zhou Can learned to write medical records on the first day he entered the hospital. After nearly a year of internship, he has already become familiar with writing medical records. The guiding nurse outside stood at the door and knocked on the door. Dr. He, can I start calling your number? Call. Number 1 Huang Fuqiu, Consultation Room No. 4. A nurse's voice came from the speakers. Soon, a middle-aged man walking with his up pushed the door open. The man held a medical record and some examination materials in his hand. Doctor, I had hemorrhoid surgery last week, and now I'm here for a review. You look pretty good, how do you feel now? Everything else is fine. It's just that the wound still hurts when I walk, and I can only sleep on my side or on my stomach. In the 2 days after the operation, it was very painful to defecate. The patient briefly described the post-operative situation. Okay, take off your pants at the back, let me check for you. Doctor He took a rough look at the medical records and took the patient to the back for an examination. The patient's wound healed well. The wound has healed. Dr. He prescribed anti-inflammatory drugs for him, and told him not to take baths, but to take the drugs on time. Come back anytime if you feel unwell. A patient is finished with this. Zhou Can was a little disappointed that he couldn't earn any experience points. However, he has also gained something. In the future, he will have a good reference for the follow-up patients who have undergone hemorrhoid surgery. Then, a second patient walked in. This is an old lady with thinning hair, with a thin figure and a large pustule on her wrist. The family member who accompanied her to see a doctor said that she was stabbed by a bamboo stick. At that time, the patient pulled out the bamboo stick without taking it seriously. As a result, after a period of time, the wound not only did not heal, but became more red and swollen. It wasn't until recently that suppuration began, and the patient had symptoms of low-grade fever and severe pain, that's when he rushed to seek medical advice. After some simple inquiries, Dr. He gave the patient a physical examination. First do a routine blood test and ultrasound, and then come to me with the test results. He directed Zhou Can to make 2 checklists in his name. Thanks to the highly developed modern technology, it is now possible to write checklists and prescribe medicines into computers. It is convenient to calculate and pay fees, and it is also convenient to check files afterwards. However, patients still have to queue up with a note. After the patient left, Hans Hung talked to him in a chatty tone. Xiao Zhou, think about it, what is the cause of this patient's abscess just now? How to treat it? Zhou Qin had already started thinking about the cause of the patient's abscess. He quickly went through the patient's symptoms and causes of the disease in his mind. Then, according to the acquired medical knowledge, analyze and locate the pathological mechanism. The low-grade fever should be an inflammatory response caused by bacteria invading the blood due to the abscess. The human body has a complete set of immune mechanisms. When the human immune system detects foreign matter or pathogen invasion, it will respond immediately. The phagocytes, lymphocytes, lymph nodes, spleen, etc. in the blood, with multiple response mechanisms, will become warriors to protect the body and kill those pathogens. Inflammation is actually a self-protection of the body. Severe pain in the arm, sleepless nights, indicating that the abscess is still spreading and destroying normal body tissue. After listening to Zhou Qin's analysis, Hans Hung nodded slightly. I suspect that there is still a foreign object in the patient's arm that has not been cleaned. This happens from time to time. Objects such as bamboo sticks or wooden thorns penetrated into the flesh, and only part of it may be pulled out because it was stuck too tightly. But the patient thought it was all pulled out. Eventually the foreign body remains in the body, causing the infection to suppurate. Pathological diagnosis experience value +1. As soon as Zhou Qin finished the analysis, he happily raised 1 experience point. The pathological diagnosis of this patient is not difficult, and it is estimated that the practice level can be competent. He now has an excellent level of regular training, so he is sure to be sure. What about the treatment plan? Incision the wound to drain the pus, clean up the broken bamboo sticks or foreign objects inside, clean the wound, suture it, bandage it, and prescribe some anti-inflammatory drugs. Zhou Qin finished the treatment plan he had planned in one breath. Hans Hung smiled slightly, there is nothing wrong with the previous steps. Anti-inflammatory drugs need to be supplemented. In this case, infusion should be given in the hospital, and oral anti-inflammatory drugs should be prescribed after the patient's infection is under control. The effect of infusion is faster than oral administration. It is stronger and can ensure no accidents to the greatest extent. In addition, it can keep abreast of the patient's condition when the patient comes to the hospital for infusion. After listening to Dr. He's instructions, Zhou Qin nodded heavily. Remember, safety comes first at all times. A doctor is a special profession, and he is in control of the patient's life and health. Any negligence may lead to serious consequences. A doctor's parental heart means that a doctor should treat patients like children, and consider them more comprehensively and meticulously. Dr. He warned him earnestly. At this time, the third patient came into the ward. This is a woman in her 30s, stylishly dressed, wearing a black shoulder bag, and looks pretty good. Walking is no different from ordinary people, and the mental state is not bad. Doesn't look sick. Please sit down. What's your problem? Doctor He asked about the woman's condition in a gentle tone. The woman lowered her head in embarrassment, not daring to look at anyone. His face was also red. I don't hide my illness from the doctor, but it's okay to say it, and there's nothing to be ashamed of. Doctor He comforted her patiently. After hesitating for a moment, she finally bit her lip and said in a low voice, I feel some pain in my chest recently. When I touch it with my hand, it seems that there is still a hard lump. The pain has been so painful these days that it is difficult to lift my hand. Zhou Qin immediately figured it out based on her drawing skills. Lumps in female are usually due to diseases such as breast hyperplasia. How long has the lump been there? It has been almost 2 years since I discovered it. But it used to be occasional pain, so I ignored it. Recently, I found that the lump was getting bigger and bigger, and I was a little scared. I checked it online, and many people said it was possible. It's breast cancer. The woman was no longer ashamed. When she mentioned the word breast cancer, there was deep fear in her eyes. Indeed, breast cancer is known as one of the 3 major killers of women. Let a lot of adult women smell the pale. Married. Married. Have you ever had a baby? The child is almost 8 years old. Wow, can't you tell, the children are so old, and you are still so young. Dr. He praised it as a joke, which immediately relieved the woman's nervousness and anxiety a lot. The atmosphere in the clinic is also much more relaxed. Hee, you're so proud of me. Doctor, do you think my disease could be breast cancer? I didn't dare to tell my husband or my child when I came for the checkup this time. Her eyes were full of anticipation. Don't worry, no one can tell right now. Go for an ultrasound first to check the thickness of the glands and whether there are nodules in the glands. Breast hyperplasia usually causes obvious pain during menstruation. Don't worry too much. Big psychological burden. Dr. He not only has profound medical knowledge and rich experience in diagnosis and treatment, but also treats patients with great patience and tries his best to comfort them. Joe Ken secretly admired the noble medical ethics displayed. The female patient queued up for an examination with a list. In this way, more than 20 patients have been treated one after another. Some are easy to diagnose and some are difficult to diagnose. Dr. He is patient, easygoing, and rigorous with each patient. It gave Joe Ken a good example. At this time, the old lady from UU reading www.uuganshu.com with a big pustule on her arm came back from the examination. Check out her test results. As Joe Ken expected, the infection led to inflammation and a low-grade fever. There is a 2 cm long shadow inside the pustule. It is basically certain that the broken bamboo stick is embedded deep in the muscle. Surgery was arranged for her. I believe it will be cured soon. The patient with breast hyperplasia also came back from the ultrasound examination. Fortunately, there were no ultrasound features such as calcification, blood flow, and unclear margins. Basically, the possibility of malignant transformation is unlikely. In view of her severe breast hyperplasia and the large size of the tumor, Dr. He suggested that she go to general surgery to remove the tumor, and then do a pathological test to prevent malignancy. She readily accepted. This operation is a simple first-level operation and can be done on an outpatient basis. But it wasn't Dr. He who performed the surgery. General surgery surgeons are on duty in the outpatient operating room. It is not a special case, and the attending doctor generally does not operate in person. Even if occasionally there is an operation that needs to be performed by myself, the patient will be arranged to be hospitalized first, and the operation will be performed the next day or at another time. Joe Ken looked at the time, it was 5:21. I'm leaving, get off work soon. And he gained a total of 8 experience points in one afternoon. Current experience in pathological diagnosis, Level 2, 98.6/100, excellent level of regular training. This made him very depressed. You can upgrade with only 1.4 experience points. God, another patient. Amen. Joe Ken prayed silently. If he earns another 1 experience point, he will only be short of 0.4 experience points. If you can spare time to read the 4 cases after you go back, you will be able to improve this most important medical skill. Boom boom boom. The knock on the door sounded so pleasant to the ear. I'll be off work soon, and the probability that this is a follow-up patient is very small. Generally, follow-up patients will be concentrated in the morning or the beginning of the afternoon. Joe Ken is on the alert, waiting to earn experience points. Come in. Dr. He's voice is always so gentle and strong. The door of the consulting room was pushed open, and a man in his 40s walked in with the support of his family. He pressed his stomach with one hand, with a pained expression on his face. Ayo, doctor, my stomach hurts badly, please help me. The man's face turned pale from the pain, and cold sweat was all over his forehead. Sit down first. Doctor, he appeared very calm and calm. When did it start hurting? It's been 2 days, it's been 2 days of pain, ah. The man kept humming miserably. To be able to hurt a middle-aged man like this, the pain level is definitely not low. Didn't you eat poisonous things? Such as poisonous mushrooms, toads, vegetables and fruits with pesticides? No, definitely not. I have been eating at home these days, and my wife and children are fine. Smoking and drinking. Does any family member have a similar medical history? No. Come on, help him to lie on the bed, I will do a physical examination. Doctor, he instructed the family members to help the patient to lie flat on the bed, and then began to do the examination. Joe Can also got up and followed to watch. According to the patient's description and symptoms, he has already begun to make pathological inferences. It's just a lack of examination data, coupled with his inexperience in clinical diagnosis, it is difficult to clarify the patient's pathological mechanism. Because there are many reasons that can cause abdominal pain. Peritonitis, gastroenteritis, gallstones, appendicitis, etc., many diseases can cause severe abdominal pain. Doctor, he pressed the patient's abdomen with his hands. Ayo! Take it easy, take it easy. The patient screamed immediately. That's the only place where it hurts, right? There's also pain in my right shoulder and right back, but it's not as bad as my stomach. After hearing this, Joe Can immediately understood that it was radiating pain caused by severe upper abdominal pain. Just like throwing a stone into a pond, with the stone falling into the water as the center, a circle of ripples will be formed and spread around. Pain is the same. It travels through nerves to surrounding areas. This phenomenon is called radiating pain in medicine. Now it can be basically concluded that the initial area of pain is in the upper right abdomen. Did your abdominal pain come on suddenly 2 days ago, or did it come on slowly? It happened suddenly. There was no sign, and the pain started suddenly, intermittently. And every time the pain got worse, the pain became unbearable in the back, and I even vomited several times. The patient provided another clue. So, asking questions is still very important. Don't be afraid of trouble, you must ask for more relevant information. Since the pain is so severe, it shouldn't be possible for you to wait until now to see a doctor, right? Have you ever been treated in another hospital? Doctor, he has rich experience in diagnosis and treatment, and immediately deduced some truths that the patient did not disclose based on the patient's description. I did see it in a small clinic. At that time, I was given an infusion and said it was anti-inflammatory. It didn't work. The clinic boss was afraid of accidents and advised me to go to a big hospital for treatment. Those small clinics give patients infusions at every turn. All kinds of antibiotics are overused, and small clinics are the most guilty. For some minor colds or minor symptoms, intravenous infusion and antibiotics are used, and the effect is really fast. As everyone knows, this is a bit like drinking doves to quench thirst. This time it got better quickly, but the body's immune system was disrupted and weakened, making it easier to get sick next time. We'll get sicker. So repeated, eventually forming a vicious circle. When the patient really needs antibiotic treatment, it will be sad to find that there is no medicine available. Because the virus in the patient's body has developed serious drug resistance. Even a random cold can be a super virus. Apart from abdominal pain, right shoulder and right back pain, do you have any other symptoms? When I touched your abdomen, it felt a little hot. A physical examination is the initial examination after a doctor's consultation. This is very important. It can help doctors discover some hidden diseases of patients. Some patients may feel embarrassed or irrelevant, and may deliberately conceal some symptoms. This requires a doctor's sharp eyes. I feel like I have a fever, chills. Well, let me measure your body temperature, heart rate, and blood pressure first, relax a bit, and don't be nervous. When we get here, we will definitely do our best to heal you. After drive, he comforted the patient. Without waiting for his order, Jokin has already cleverly rushed to measure the patient's blood pressure, heart rate, and body temperature. These basic tasks, how can the superior doctor do it himself? Be diligent, doctor, he must be happy to see it. The next time you ask to take him to the clinic, the probability of agreeing will increase a lot. Body temperature is 39.6, pulse rate is 98/min, and blood pressure is 120/mmHg. There is no abnormality in percussion of both lungs. There is no chest murmur when breathing, and the breathing rate is about 25 times/min. Jokin made a series of measurements on the patient. The range between 39.1 degrees and 41 degrees is already a high fever. The patient's condition was more serious and complicated than imagined. Let's do a routine blood test and ultrasound imaging first. If the results are not satisfactory, you may need to do a CT scan. Doctor, he said this to both the patient and Jokin. Jokin hurriedly ran to the computer to apply for a medical examination. Because your condition is complicated, the outpatient department will be off work immediately. Before the results of your examination come out, the etiology of UU reading www.uuganshu.com is not clear, so you cannot be hospitalized. It is recommended that you go to the general surgery department of the inpatient department after the examination. Find Dr. Feng, and I will explain the situation to him. The patient's condition may deteriorate further at any time. Doctor, he did not dare to take it lightly. If the condition is not serious, the patient is usually allowed to come back the next day. After the patient left, Doctor, he stood up and got ready to leave work. Xiaozhou, how's it going? Follow me for an afternoon. Did you gain anything? I have gained a lot. I have benefited a lot from the process of receiving various patients and how to deal with them, especially the medical ethics and medical style. You have set a very good example for me. Haha, you kid has such a sweet mouth. All right, it's time for the nurse at the guidance desk to come and close the door. Let's go. After Jokin followed Dr. He out of the consulting room, he was still thinking about what kind of disease the last patient had. He is only short of 1.4 experience points, he is not reconciled. The pain in the right upper abdomen radiated to the right shoulder and back. The patient also had the habit of smoking and drinking. In addition, the patient had a high fever and chills. All these symptoms were combined, which seemed to be a problem with the bile duct. Could it be cholecystolithiasis? Jokin seems to have grasped something, and his eyes became as bright as stars. Every time a doctor diagnoses a patient, it is like doing a math word problem. After calculating the results, there will be a special sense of accomplishment. Pathological diagnosis experience value plus 0.4. The experience value that I had been looking forward to reappeared again. Just add a little less. Only increased by 0.4. Under normal circumstances, clinical diagnosis, as long as the answer is correct, will add 1 experience point. Why is more than half less? Dr. He, what disease did you say the last patient was? Jokin asked after a few steps. Medicine is a rigorous subject. I never make subjective guesses, but conduct a comprehensive argument based on the results of the examination, combined with the patient's symptoms, medical history, age, gender, hobbies, and other information. However, judging from the patient's symptoms, there is likely to be more than one lesion site. After speaking, Dr. He smiled. I still have to check the bed, you can think slowly. As an attending doctor, his status is higher than that of residents and interns, and the responsibilities on his shoulders are even greater. Although there is a dedicated bed doctor in the inpatient department, the attending doctor cannot be a hands-off shopkeeper. In particular, some critical cases need to be more careful. For example, the patient Lu Lao had surgery on today is a key monitoring object. Before leaving, Mr. Lu specially told Dr. He to watch it. After Jokin watched Dr. He leave, he began to bow his head in thought. According to Dr. He's words, the patient has more than one disease. This also makes sense, why his deduction is correct, but he only got 0.4 experience points. Indicates that there are other diseases that have not been diagnosed. What disease is there? Zhou Qin racked his brains, but after repeated thinking, he still had no clue. Sigh, there is no test data, and only a few symptoms are used to diagnose a common bile duct stone. After all, my level is still a bit low. Zhou Qin sighed. Doctor, he must have made a diagnosis, but he just refused to say it. It seems that there is a huge gap between the diagnostic ability of the regular training level and the attending level. Since he couldn't figure it out, he didn't waste any more time. Hanging from a tree is not the work of a wise man. Now, his pathological diagnosis experience value is level 2, 99/100. Not much difference, just 1 experience point. I looked at the time, it is now 5:52. If you go back to the dormitory right away, you will do nothing but read medical books. Maybe 10 cases can be read by tomorrow morning. It takes him 5 hours to read a case calculation in an average of 30 minutes. In fact, it takes longer to read the more difficult cases. Spend all your energy and time on pathological diagnosis improvement, just for this last point of experience. How to count, how to suffer. Because he can use these few hours to improve the 2 medical skills of hemostasis and incision. It is absolutely sure that these 2 medical skills will be upgraded to the 3rd level. As for the remaining 1 experience point of the pathological diagnosis, he is going to sharpen his gun tomorrow. As long as you find another patient in the hospital for diagnosis, there is a high probability that you will be able to finish the job and be promoted to the 3rd level. At that time, the 5 medical skills will all be at the level of residents, and the recruitment of regular training will be sure. After making a decision, he no longer wasted time. Quickly rushed to the Science and Education building to buy white mice for practice. Considering that practicing incision and hemostasis consumes a lot of props. Especially cutting, it's not just a simple cut on a small animal that can increase experience points. Rather, dissection is required. This requirement is still quite high. It is estimated that a white mouse can be dissected for about 20 knives at most, and it will die. Anatomy plus 0.2 experience points. 20 knives is 4 points of experience. After death, you can still practice dissection on internal organs, but if you practice on dead props, the experience value will be halved, only 0.1 experience value once. It is expected to dissect about 25 times, with a total experience value of 2.5. Be conservative, calculate by adding 6 experience points to a white mouse. His current cutting experience value, level 2, is 9.7/100. You still need 90.3 experience points to advance to level 3. He calculated that he needed to buy at least 16 white mice to be safe. 200 yuan apiece, the total is 3,200 yuan. Zhou Qin's family is well off, so it's not short of money. Buy me 16 white mice. Pick the right ones. Are you sure you want to buy this much? The doctor on duty was obviously shocked by the number. Doctors usually buy white mice for practice, and those who are more generous can buy 1 or 2 at most. This young guy bought 16 at a time, which is great. I'm sure. Zhou Qin directly scanned the QR code to pay without bothering. The doctor on duty found a larger cage, and picked out 16 top quality experimental white mice for him to put in it. After Zhou Qin took it, he just turned around and was about to go out when 3 people came in. Almost hit him head-on. Zhou Qin. The leading beauty is tall, with beautiful facial features, and her skin is as white and tender as a baby's. Brown-yellow shawl hair, coupled with a white coat, tisk, amazing. Women should be pretty and filial. She is as beautiful as the fairy who does not eat fireworks. Her big phoenix eyes showed surprise and joy after recognizing Zhou Qin. Squad leader, long time no see. Jokin did not expect to meet the monitor here. To be more precise, she still has 2 honors, class flower and one of the 3 school flowers. She is not only responsible for her beauty, but also has real talents and learning, which is by no means comparable to a vase. To say she was the best girl in the class would be an understatement. The 2 entered Tuya Hospital together for internship. I heard that she performed extremely well during her internship in the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology, and she has already won the favor of Director Zhang Baiwa of the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology. How is it? Is the internship going well? Yang Chan looked him up and down, and finally fixed on the mouse cage in his hand. He was obviously a little surprised to see him buying so many white mice. Oh, that's it. I heard about your glorious deeds in the Obstetrics and Gynecology department. It not only won honor for our class 512, but also added luster to his alma mater. Jokin would definitely feel inferior in front of her before. Because she is so good. Now that there is an experience point system and medical skills in all aspects are advancing by leaps and bounds, he also has a little bit of confidence to talk on an equal footing. Of course, having strength does not mean raising your butt. You can also be a humble gentleman. Demonstrating self-confidence in a low-key manner has always been an excellent tradition of the Chinese nation. It's not as good as you said, I'm just lucky. Hey, buy so many white mice to practice dissection or suture. I'm ready to practice. You know, my medical skills have always been very good. Preparing for tomorrow's regular training recruitment. Don't let me have a little dream. Hee, I have never seen you so poor-mouthed when I was studying before. Old classmate, come on. No matter what the result is, as long as you work hard, you will have no regrets. There was comfort in her words. Obviously not very optimistic about Jokin. Thinking about it, this year's regular training recruitment competition is extremely fierce, and the elimination rate of not particularly outstanding interns is almost 100%. In her impression, Jokin's medical skills are not bad, but his medical skills in all aspects are somewhat unsatisfactory. Seeing that he bought so many white mice, he preconceived that Jokin's medical skills were still at a relatively superficial stage. This level is not competitive. The squad leader is still educated and speaks well. Goodbye. Jokin heard what she meant, but didn't explain much. Tomorrow we'll see for ourselves. He waved at her and left with the rat cage in his arms. Dr. Yang, how good is your classmate's medical skills? You actually need to buy such a white mouse to practice. I don't know, but he has been working hard. You should teach him next time. It is wasteful to use white mice to practice dissection, and the direction is wrong. The anastomosis of blood vessels in the tail of rats is the real high-precision technique. The sound of their conversation reached Jokin's ears. He just smiled lightly. With his current 3-level suture and 3-level ligation medical skills, the success rate of anastomosis of mouse tail blood vessels should be 100%. Looking at the interns in Tuya Hospital, there are at most 1 or 2 who are better than him in vascular anastomosis. The high-precision technology that the female intern mentioned was nothing more than that in front of his experience point system. Jokin took the white mouse back to the dormitory. Good guy, I have practiced one by one early. It seems that everyone is preparing for tomorrow's regular training recruitment. All of them are trying their best to fight out from the thousands of troops. Wow, Brother Kin, aren't you? Are you buying so many white mice for barbecue? As long as you don't find it disgusting, after I'm done practicing, I can take it to the barbecue for you. Jokin smiled badly. Forget it, I don't have such a strong taste. Hearing that he was eating rat meat, the roommate waved his hands in fright. I think Jokin is going to risk his life in order to get the training qualification. Brothers, come on. Whoever is lucky enough to stay, reading www.yuyuganshu.com will have to cover other people in the future, and he will also be worthy of us. Years of roommates. The roommates applauded loudly, and each of them practiced more attentively. Jokin sat in front of his practice table, and in order to save time, directly slapped the white rats in this cage. After the anesthesia was successful, a white mouse was caught, fixed on a wax plate, and the two medical skills of anatomy and hemostasis began to be improved. Cutting experience value plus 0.2. Hemostasis experience value plus 0.2, plus 0.2. The easiest thing to improve is the experience value of hemostasis, there is no one. As long as the bleeding point is found, the electrocoagulation knife will be used to touch it, and 0.2 experience points will be obtained immediately. Before he knew it, Jokin had practiced until 12:31 in the middle of the night. At this moment, all 16 white mice had been exhausted by him. The two medical skills of hemostasis and incision have all been successfully promoted to the third level. He checked the experience value of medical skills. Jokin, intern pathological diagnosis, level 2, current experience value 99/100. Excellent level of training. Cutting, level 3, current experience value 5.7/1000. Residential doctors are inferior. Stitching, level 3, current experience value 21/1000. Residential doctors are inferior. Ligation, level 3, current experience value 1/1000. Residential doctors are inferior. Hemostasis, level 3, current experience value 652.4/1000. Intermediate level of hemostatic ability for residents. Among all the medical skills, the best one right now is hemostasis. He actually reached the appalling intermediate level of residency. This level is comparable to surgical residents who have worked for more than 3 years.